Hello everyone! This week we're going to talk about some things that, well, I like to give this advice, but sometimes I often find myself needing to take it myself, and we are going to talk about time management today. So, one of the most important things about time management is that this is going to be really key if you are going to have a successful college career, because I'm sure you already have all sorts of classes, extracurricular activities, and also personal life stuff that you have to manage on an everyday basis. But now, when it comes to college, you don't necessarily have, someone like a parent kind of being able to drive you around anywhere or making sure that you get to places on time. That is going to be all on you. So you need to be able to make sure that you manage your time effectively. First things first, we need to identify black holes in your schedule. And black holes are basically points in your day where you can kind of zone out for hours. And that happens to me too. There are usually a couple of websites where I can just go on there and it'll be 2, 3, 4 hours later, and then I sort of snap out of it and wonder, whoa, what the heck happened? It could be something like social media, it could be something like video games, it could be any old thing, right? Anything that sort of takes your time without you even realizing it. So you need to identify what those black holes are, that way we can kind of manage around them. And we also need to set priorities. Priorities are basically tasks and activities that you need and want to do, and you rank them from most to least important, basically. And those activities and tasks, we will actually have a hand in being able to manage those and list those in a second. But we need to set priorities. And we need to identify our prime time. This is really key, especially when you are choosing classes for your college career, because you get to set your own schedule. And especially, it all sort of depends on whether you plan on working a job while going to school, if you plan on living on campus or living off campus. All of these things factor in. And what your prime time is the time that you are most effective. Basically, it's identifying when you are most alert and ready to learn. Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? Do you find yourself most effective at night? Based on that, based on knowing when it is that you're most effective and when it is that you're more likely to sort of zone out, that will be really key in establishing when it is that you can schedule classes and how much time to give yourself in the morning before getting to those classes, etc., etc. So identify and be honest with yourself. Identify what kind of person you are. Now, there are two kinds of tasks when we're setting priorities here. There are tasks that are important, and there are tasks that are urgent. The important tasks could be things like doing homework, basically getting to work on time, right? Very important things. And urgent things are things that need to be completed very soon. Things that have due dates, and things that have really close deadlines. Those are the things that are urgent, right? So how do we organize these things? We can sort of see these things in quadrants. We have quadrant 1, which is the urgent stuff and the important stuff. And that is your homework that's due tomorrow, right? Your research paper that's due in a couple of days, your final exam that's perhaps next week, right? These are things that are upcoming and they're coming up against you quickly, and they are very important. Quadrant 2 is the important stuff, but it's not necessarily urgent. This might be if, say, at this point in the semester, right, close to sort of the beginning, you realize that you have exams coming up, you know that you have papers due for other classes, etc., and you can sort of identify those things. These could be things like eventually choosing your classes, or perhaps trying to figure out what your major is, it's not necessarily a deadline that presses down on you, but it's very, very important. Quadrant 3 is the not important stuff, but that is really, really urgent. And things that you feel like you just have to do right now, but that aren't necessarily important, like, oh my god, I have to check Facebook, like I just have to. Not necessarily important, but you feel like it's urgent, right? Then we have the not important and not urgent stuff. That is basically when you have things like black holes that sort of take up your time, leisure activities, recreational activities, all sorts of things like that. Checking Facebook, playing video games, etc., 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 right? So, here we go. Here's sort of like another way of organizing that. We have the pressure of nearing deadlines for Quadrant 1. We have the important and not urgent stuff where there's no deadline pressure, but there is very much an importance there. It's not important and urgent. It's not important, but you feel like you have to do it. I have to do this like right now. And Quadrant 4 is not important, not urgent. Quite frankly, these are just things that sort of waste your time. So, where should you spend the most energy? You should spend the most energy in Quadrant 2, and spend more time in Quadrants 2 and 1, where you are either dealing with things that have pressing deadlines, or you are making plans for the future. On the other hand, you should say no to Quadrants 3 and 4. Not waste your time as much as possible, and not carry on important things as if you have to do them right now. So this is where your journal comes in. I want you to think of the last couple of days, and I want you to list 10 very specific things that you did. And these can range from, studying for an exam that maybe you have on Monday to completing this journal, perhaps. Or, even things like, checking Facebook or playing a video game, right? Be very, very specific about the things that you did. Then, place those 10 specific actions in whatever quadrant they fall under. Now, be honest with yourself. And if I'm honest with you, then, hey, I have a lot of times where I have a lot of things happening in Quadrant 4, and sometimes I do a couple of things that belong in Quadrant 3 to the neglect of things that should be going on in Quadrants 1 and 2, right? Be honest with yourself. And figure out where it is that you are spending the most time. Now, where do you spend most of your time? How do you feel about that? And now that you sort of see all of your actions laid out in such a fashion, what changes can you make in order to better manage your time? So, the way that you can sort of organize yourself is in a variety of ways. You can have a master calendar, which could show you the entire semester at a glance. That way you can know exactly from the beginning of one semester all the way up to the end. You can list all of the important dates, all of the exam days. You can list when spring break is, when you have days off, all sorts of things like that, right? And it's nice to basically see your entire semester at a glance. Or you can opt for something that is more of a weekly timetable, where you can see the activities of an entire week at a time. Or you might be the kind of person who would rather manage a daily to-do list, and this could be something where it's just everyday things you gotta do, and it's, it's something that you can keep portable. Thankfully, because of the loveliness of technology, we have the ability of keeping all these things in an electronic fashion, and you can have apps and all sorts of things that can have your master calendar, your weekly timetable, and your daily to-do list all in one space. And so basically do what's right for you and kind of figure out what works. Sometimes I've been known to go through a whole bunch of different apps trying to figure out, what's gonna work right for me. Do I need to see the entire month, or do I need to see things day by day? Figure out what's right for you, but do definitely keep some sort of a schedule so that you are aware of the things that are going to happen. Then, the work phase. And the work phase is where you just follow your schedule. Make a schedule and stick to it. And I gotta tell you, it is really, really hard, and I have a huge amount of trouble trying to do this. You have to learn how to say no. I epic fail at that all the time, right? Sometimes people will say, oh, can you have this meeting really quick? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not, right? Because you want to be helpful, and you think, hey, I can manage it, right? But sometimes you end up overloading yourself if you don't know how to say no, right? So it's okay. It's okay to know when it is that you need to take a break from things, right? When maybe you shouldn't join this particular extracurricular activity this semester because you're going to have particularly hard classes, right? It's okay. You don't have to do everything all at once. I say this, and oftentimes I don't take my own advice. But you take my advice. Do as I say, not as I do. Learn how to say no. It's okay. And every once in a while, we sort of rag on Quadrant 4 as being quite simply time wasters, but sometimes it's okay to set some time in order to just waste some time. It's okay for you to be able to spend some time, doing something that's gonna kind of take your mind off of some things, right? And just kind of get away from it all. Schedule some breaks in too, right? Make sure that you do take a break, and make sure that you do schedule in some time so that you can take care of yourself and not just your business. And hey, take an e-break, right? If you know that if you deny yourself Facebook, right, for an entire day, you are going to be compelled to abandon everything that you're trying to work on and just sort of binge on social media for hours and hours and hours, then know that about yourself and schedule in some time when you say, all right, I'm going to work for an hour and then I'm going to take some time to sort of kind of do whatever it is I have to do on social media and then go right back, right? It's okay to take a break from things, but, don't deny yourself so that you binge later, and, but don't sort of absolutely spend all your time in Quadrant 4 to the detriment of Quadrants 1 and 2, right? So it's okay. Schedule some time in to take some breaks. Whenever possible, if there are any opportunities for you to get things done remotely, like if you can schedule meetings with a professor over the phone or via Skype or something, if you can take care of things, say over email, rather than having to drive over to campus or take the extra time out that it would take to physically be somewhere, definitely do that and save the time when you can. And also, here's something interesting, right? We can talk all we want about making schedules, but sometimes there is such a thing as overscheduling, and that leaves very little wiggle room that if a surprise does come up, if something unexpected happens, then it completely sends our entire schedule all to heck, right? So what you end up doing is you have to basically learn to expect the unexpected. You have to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room in order to account for the possibility of a meeting taking longer than it was scheduled. Maybe there's some extra traffic on the way to class because of some event, whatever, and you may need to sort of take into account whatever that might end up doing to your schedule, right? And then, of course, try to figure out how to combat procrastination. And what is procrastination? It's the habit of putting off and delaying tasks that you have to accomplish. And basically, it's, there's a fun saying that basically says, why do today what you can put off until tomorrow? And that's basically procrastination in a nutshell, right? I often try to put things to the last minute, and you shouldn't. You will find that even if you are one of those people that can quote-unquote work well under pressure, it's not healthy to constantly be in a state of putting things until the last minute all the time. What you need to do is, have something like that master calendar where you can see far in advance the things you have to do and make little steps every day to get there. You don't have to complete your paper, 5 weeks before the deadline, but don't save it for the night before either. At the very least, take some baby steps, right? So maybe 5 weeks ahead of the deadline, you figure out what the requirements are, you figure out how many pages it has to be and all that stuff, and maybe one day you start with a title page. And then maybe the next day, you write half of the outline, and then, I don't know, maybe you write the other half of the outline sometime later, right? So do little bits ahead of time so that you're not always headbutting against a deadline later. That's basically you're spending your time in Quadrant 2 rather than in Quadrant 1. So check your to-do lists and check your calendars and see how well you're doing at getting things done. Are there things that you have been sort of leaving until the last minute and that you keep sort of pushing forward that you could very, very easily do right then at the moment? Are you getting a lot of stuff done? If you are, then hey, reward yourself for getting things done, right? It's not all work. You have to take some time out to deliver some care to yourself every once in a while, so make sure that you have time set aside to reward yourself for being a hard worker. All work and no play makes you a very, very, very unhappy and super stressed person. So, once you sort of have this all kind of looked at, reassess your priorities, right? Are you sort of prioritizing things that aren't necessarily important? Consider your personal style. Maybe you figured out that having a written calendar isn't necessarily the right thing for you, and maybe you should figure out an app. Or maybe you realize that an app isn't necessarily the way you should go, and you might be better suited to using a paper agenda next time, right? Who knows? Just because you have a personal style that might work for you one semester doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for the next one, so stay flexible and reconsider your personal style when you can. Consider doing less, right? Learn how to say no. Maybe you're doing too much, and if you try to do too much, then all of those things that you have to do will not be done and will not have the same amount of attention that perhaps they require, right? So maybe if you do less, you can pay more attention, you can work a little bit harder on a small number of things, and those things will actually end up being great, rather than spreading yourself thin and not doing well at anything. Now, if you find yourself spending a lot of time in quadrants 3 and 4, and you find yourself with a decent amount of extra time, then maybe you should consider doing more. Perhaps having a little bit of extra pressure from doing a few more things might sort of give you the motivation to get up in the morning, get off the couch, right? If you schedule things to do, then it will give you motivation rather than basically spending all your time in quadrant 4, right? So be honest with yourself either way. Are you doing too much, or maybe you're doing too little? Well, I hope you've sort of had an interesting look at perhaps the way that your time could be managed a little bit better with these tips, and I'm especially looking forward to seeing how your journals come out. Hopefully we can get you to the point where you are an expert manager of your time, and you can get it all done and still have some time to have a little fun. See you next week.